जियोग्राफी, वेदर इट इज कल्चरल लैंडस्केप, जो भी चीजें हम अपने आसपास देखते हैं, समझते हैं, इंटरेक्ट करते हैं, उन सब सारी चीजों का अध्ययन हम भूगोल में करते हैं। तो एक्चुअली अगर आप ज्योग्राफी को सब्जेक्ट के तौर में समझें तो इट्स अ वेरी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव सब्जेक्ट, राइट? इट्स अ वेरी ब्रॉड
तो
सब्जेक्ट,
वॉइस
मेनी पीपल, इट्स
स्टक
वेरी
हो रही
डिफिकल्ट टू
है।
कम आउट विद। वॉइस स्टक हो रही है? हेलो, कैन यू हियर मी?
सर अब आ रही है।
ऑडिबल।
एक सेकंड होल्ड करें आप, एक सेकंड। ओके, सो आई ट्राई टू बी, if there is any problem please remind me, है ना, अगर आवाज में कहीं प्रॉब्लम आती है तो। यस,
Okay, sir.
सो जब भी हम भूगोल एज अ सब्जेक्ट की बात करते हैं, ज्योग्राफी एज अ डिसिप्लिन की हम बात करते हैं, एंड इफ यू लुक एट द नेचर ऑफ ज्योग्राफी, इज अ वेरी डिफरेंट सब्जेक्ट फ्रॉम अदर सिस्टर डिसिप्लिन्स, whether in natural sciences or in social sciences. The scope matter of geography is very wide, the canvas is very big, and therefore if you want to think about the subject matter of geography per se, I'm not starting with biogeography. Let me spend few minutes on like what is geography and then coming to biogeography. Okay, so if you look at the canvas of geography as a discipline is very different than other subjects. So if you think about different works where geographers are working or they have worked in the past, अगर आप वर्तमान के समय में भूगोलवेत्ताओं के द्वारा किए जा रहे विभिन्न प्रकार के शोध पत्रिका या शोध के प्रोजेक्ट्स को देखें आज के दौर में या पहले के दौर में, तो आपको वेरिएशन मिलता है ना। तो कुछ भूगोलवेत्ता जो हैं वो जियोमॉर्फोलॉजी के ऊपर रिसर्च करते हैं, डिफरेंट लैंड फॉर्म्स, हाउ दिस डिफरेंट लैंड फॉर्म हैव इमर्ज्ड, what were the processes behind the formation of landforms, है ना, whether it's different kinds of orogenetic forces, epirogenetic forces, erosional forces, बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स हैं जो हमारे लैंडफॉर्म को, उसका ओरिजिन को डिस्क्राइब करते हैं, उसके डेवलपमेंट को डिस्क्राइब करते हैं, उसके डिसइंटीग्रेशन को डिस्क्राइब करते हैं. So a lot of geographers are working on the geomorphology, and geomorphology is one of the very important branch of geography, right? And why it is important, biogeography will help you to understand it. Then geographers also study climate. We look at various climate elements, whether it is precipitation, whether it is distribution of air belts in the atmosphere, and we look at currents. Right now we are passing through the monsoons in India, different parts of the countries under the monsoons. So geographers also study the climate phenomena, and what is the importance of the climate and climate change on everyday life for different people in the society, whether it is farmers, right, whether it is people, those who are doing any other activity, because every activity is influenced by climate. For example, many of us who are sitting today and talking in the classroom, using fans or air conditioner or whatever, we are completely cut out from the natural environment, right? So how, किस प्रकार से जो बाहर का वातावरण है और ग्रेजुअली जो हमारी जो जीवन शैली है, पद्धति है, वो किस प्रकार से बदल गई है. तो ये जो क्लाइमेट का इम्पैक्ट हो रहा है डिफरेंट लाइफस्टाइल के ऊपर, या फिर जो हमारा जीविकोपार्जन के विभिन्न संसाधन है उसके प्रयोग करने के ऊपर, तो इन सब चीजों का भी अध्ययन भूगोलवेत्ता करते हैं, जोग्राफर्स करते हैं, right? Now, so you see that we study landforms, we study climate. Geographers also study economics, they also study politics, they also study culture, they study society, they study demography, right? So there are different branches, sub branches within geography that we investigate, we examine. But the major difference in geography as compared to other social sciences or natural sciences is जो मेन जो अंतर है, that we try to examine all the phenomena, whether they are natural, whether they are physical or human or environmental, from spatial lens. So I'm sure you must be reading about geographical thought, you may be reading about understanding the nature of geography. So अगर आप geographer हैं, आपका जो study का tool है, there is no one basic tool, right? The mantra of geography has been changing with time. So there was geography was a regional science. Geography became geography as a science of areal differentiation. Then geography became a science of spatial synthesis. Now we are talking about everyday life geographies, right? So in different part of the world, people see and practice geography in a very different way. There is no, one rule that this is the way only that you have to work. A lot of geographers are doing very fancy technical analysis, spatial analysis, GIS and remote sensing applications, helping society to meet its demands or facing different challenges on daily basis. So for example, like today we are, all of us, not today, in the last 1.5 years, are struggling to cope with the ongoing COVID-19, right? Which is a pandemic, kind of a disaster. Now, how geographers can help to give a scientific perspective to policymakers in order to make informed decisions so that society can help to cope with these pandemics or any other disasters, right? So geographers do play a very significant role in disaster risk reduction, right? So whether it is, floods every year, in different part of India and different part of the world, occurrences of flood is a regular phenomenon. And, millions of people are affected annually by the flood situation. Similarly, you have droughts. There is a very large part of the country that is subject to droughts, frequent droughts. For example, there are places that are chronically subjected to floods, whether in Maharashtra, Rajasthan, UP, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Bihar, various parts of the country which is subjected to annual floods, annual droughts. And imagine the impact of these floods on the people, on the livestock, on the livelihood, and of course on the national economy. So we as a geographer study these processes, these events, not in isolation, but as you know, that geography is a spatial science, it is an integrated science. So we look at the impacts of any event from various perspectives. You see, so if you're analyzing, a drought, how do you define a drought? What is the area affected by drought? So for example, a state like Maharashtra, which is relatively well-off state in terms of its overall state gross domestic product and its economic contribution to the country, but then within Maharashtra, means outside Maharashtra, people from other part of the country think, well, Maharashtra, everything is good. But if you go within Maharashtra, just one example I'm telling you, we find tremendous spatial or regional inequalities within the state of Maharashtra. And so largely it is the western part of the Maharashtra that is endowed with tremendous resources, both natural and economic. Major cities, Mumbai and Pune and Kolhapur, these are on the western parts, and a lot of agriculture and, fruits production and everything is there. But as you move from the west to the eastern part of the Maharashtra, towards the region called Vidarbha, right? Or if you go to Khandesh region on the northwestern part of Maharashtra, these are regions which are very much, the general status of population or the economic status is not very good, because of the frequent advent of drought condition. So every year when you have a drought, a lot of farmers, you must have heard about a lot of farmers find themselves in a very big mess. A lot of stress is there if there is an agriculture failure due to drought, if there is no proper irrigation. And then situation becomes so difficult that many farmers who have taken loans, they are not able to repay the loans, right? So if you think how these, environmental changes or climate, the climate change related impacts on humanity, on human beings. So these impacts are very clear to us, particularly in the last 5 to 6 decades, and recent 2-3 decades have been phenomenal, right? So for example, if you see that the stretch of the summer season used to be for 3 to 4 months, but now it seems like it has extended for like 7 or 8 months. The monsoons have reduced, the effect of the winters has reduced, so there's a lot of things which is changing in the environment and the climate, and among various reasons, the human activity or role of human population has a very big role. right? So as a geographers, not only do we study the physical phenomena and the processes, geomorphology, climatology, but we also see the linkages of these environmental changes on human population or other लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म, बीट फ्लोरा और फौना, चाहे वो वनस्पतियां हों, चाहे वो विभिन्न प्रकार के जीव जंतु हों, इन सभी के ऊपर होने वाले प्रभाव, जिसका मुख्य कारण जो हमारी भू-आकृति है या हमारी जो हमारा मौसम या फिर जलवायु का जो परिवर्तन हो रहा है, इन सब प्रकार के परिवर्तन कैसे हो रहे हैं उसको हम मॉनिटर करते हैं, किस पेस से हो रहे हैं या नहीं हो रहे उसको मॉनिटर करते हैं। आप इस चीज को जरूर समझते होंगे कि जो जलवायु की जो परिस्थिति होती है वो लॉन्ग पीरियड ऑफ टाइम के लिए एग्जिस्ट करती है, राइट? सो यू डोंट सी क्लाइमेट चेंजिंग एवरी डे, व्हाट यू सी एवरी डे चेंजिंग इज अ वेदर फेनोमेना। मौसम जो है वो बदलता है, राइट? बट जलवायु एक लंबे समय के बाद बदलती है, एक्सपोजर टू अ प्रोलॉन्ग कंडीशन, उसके बाद जलवायु में परिवर्तन आता है। तो यदि हम देखें किस प्रकार से जलवायु परिवर्तन से मानव की विविध प्रकार की जो भी क्रियाकलाप है उसके ऊपर प्रभाव पड़ रहा है कि नहीं पड़ रहा है, इसका शोध, इसका अध्ययन भूगोल के वैज्ञानिक करते हैं। और किस प्रकार से ये परिवर्तन लोगों की विभिन्न स्थितियों को प्रभावित कर रहा है, चाहे वो कृषि हो, चाहे वो आप लाइवलीहुड क्या कहते हैं एनिमल हस्बेंड्री करते हो, राइट? हर प्रकार की फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आप हिंदुस्तान में देखें, हमारे यहाँ जल, मतलब ईश्वर की कृपा है कि हमारे यहाँ जल के संसाधन काफी समय तक अच्छे रहे हैं, और हमारे यहाँ बहुत सारी ऐसी रिवर सिस्टम रही हैं जो कि पेरेनियल रिवर सोर्सेज है, राइट? सो फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आप गंगा को नॉर्थ में देखें, ब्रह्मपुत्रा को नॉर्थ ईस्ट में देखें, दीज आर वेरी लार्ज एंड पेरेनियल रिवर्स, और उसका जो रिवर सिस्टम है बहुत बड़ा है। तो खासकर हमारा जो ग्रेटर प्लेन है और जो नॉर्थ ईस्ट का इलाका, इट्स वेरी मच इंडोर्ड विथ द वाटर रिसोर्सेज फॉर अ लॉन्ग पीरियड ऑफ टाइम। सिमिलरली हमारा वेस्ट में अगर आप देखें, इंडस वैली एंड इट्स ट्रिब्यूटरीज, दे आर ऑल्सो क्रेडल ऑफ द सिविलाइजेशन, इंडस रिवर सिविलाइजेशन, जिसके सामने हमारा इतनी पुरानी हमारी सभ्यता, मोर देन 5000 years, इज रनिंग एंड डूइंग गुड। साउथ में अगर आप देखें तो वाटर की स्कैरसिटी काफी समय से सीरियस है, बिकॉज वी डोंट हैव एनी पेरेनियल रिवर सोर्स इन द साउथ, राइट? सो मोस्टली जब आप समर्स के टाइम में जाते हैं, हम देखते हैं कि साउथ में बहुत पानी की दिक्कत है। मुझे नहीं मालूम आप लोगों में से कितने लोगों ने साउथ में ट्रेन में ट्रेवल किया है, लेकिन अगर आप ट्रेन में वहाँ ट्रेवल करें और आप किसी भी रेलवे स्टेशन पर उतरें और अगर आप चाहते हैं कि मैं अपने बॉटल में पानी भरूं, तो दिस इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट, इट्स वेरी रेयर टू फाइंड रेलवे स्टेशन। एंड टिपिकली आप ये देखते हैं, कई बार मध्य प्रदेश में हमारा भी आना जाना हुआ है और इंडिया के हर जगह भी हमने ट्रेन में सफर किया है। सो इफ यू गो एंड यू वांट टू फेच वाटर फ्रॉम द टैप ऑन द स्टेशन, it is quite easy. I mean, mostly they work. But if you go to southern part of the country, it's very less likely that you find tap with running water in many part of the southern states, particularly if you are going to the in the summer season, है ना? तो इस प्रकार से जो परिस्थितियां हमारे सामने प्रस्तुत हुई हैं नेचर के द्वारा, और किस प्रकार से उस परिस्थिति का हम प्रयोग कर रहे हैं, लेकिन प्रयोग इस तरह से नहीं कर रहे हैं ताकि हम अपनी जो मिनिमम नीड है उसको फुलफिल कर सकें। प्रयोग इस तरीके से कर रहे हैं जिसको हम बोलते हैं अनमाइंडफुल एक्सप्लॉयटेशन ऑफ नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज। पानी बह रहा है तो बहने दीजिए, है कि नहीं? आजकल ये अच्छी बात है कि हमारे यहाँ इनिशिएटिव है कि हाउ टू प्रोवाइड एक्सेस टू टैप वाटर। गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का नया प्रोग्राम है, हाउ टू प्रोवाइड एक्सेस टू टैप वाटर टू ऑल इंडियन हाउस होल्ड बाई 2022 आई थिंक, है कि नहीं? बहुत अच्छा प्रोग्राम है। सिमिलरली वी दिस स्वच्छ भारत मिशन सिंस 2015 onward is another very good example of providing basic hygiene and sanitation to Indian households, everybody without any, because this is a basic human right. लेकिन साथ ही साथ ये भी देखने की जरूरत है कि किस प्रकार से हम इन सब सुविधाओं के साथ जो हमारे संसाधन है उसका इस प्रकार से हम दोहन कर रहे हैं कि उनकी सस्टेनेबिलिटी का बड़ा इशू है। फॉर एग्जांपल, मेनी ऑफ अस हु आर यूजिंग द वेस्टर्न टॉयलेट्स, whenever you do a flush, do you know how much water goes in for one when you flush it one time? At least 15 to 20 liters water go in one flush. So imagine अगर दिन में अगर आप 10 से 15 बार अगर टॉयलेट आप जा रहे हैं, वॉशरूम जा रहे हैं, कितना पानी आप पर डे उसमें वेस्ट हो रहा है। So I don't know what is the best way. I don't know. Westerners probably they have a different system, but I mean, just one example I'm telling you that we have to think about options of how to make a judicious यूज नॉट मिस यूज ऑफ इट. चाहे वो वाटर हो, आप देखते हैं अगर आप ब्रश कर रहे हो या आप शेव कर रहे हो, even if you're taking a bath, a lot of water go waste. But there are many countries in the world where even getting water for drinking is a very difficult task. If you go to Middle East, if you go to Middle East Asia, for example, the places like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, such places, Iraq, such places where the nature has not endowed them with optimum water supply. Rather, they are endowed with a lot of petroleum resources. So getting water is not easy. And let me give you one more example. You may be knowing कि दुनिया में सबसे ज़्यादा रेन रिसीव करने वाला जो स्टेशन है वो इंडिया में है, राइट? मौसिनराम, नियर चिरापुंजी, राइट? लेकिन क्या आप ये जानते हैं कि वहां इतना रेनफॉल होने के बाद भी वहां के लोगों को पीने का पानी अवेलेबल नहीं होता है? They don't have a system where they can store water. So a lot of rain happens, and then through the mountains, the entire rainwater goes to river, and then everything is washed away, right? So they do not have a provision to store the water. So often you will find, if you happen to visit to these places, आपको ये देखने को मिलेगा कि लोग जो झरने होते हैं वहां पे बैठ के they are maybe collecting water, and then they will treat and use it, or maybe they are washing clothes and they are having bath, everything along these jharnas, right? So point ये कि अगर हम दुनिया में या देश में जो भी नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज हमारे यहाँ अवेलेबल है उसको देखें और किस प्रकार से हम उसका अनमाइंडफुल तरीके से एक्सप्लॉइटेशन हो रहा है. आज की डेट में अगर आप वाटर को देखें, शायद एक बहुत बड़ा संकट हमारे सामने प्रस्तुत होने वाला है. वाटर इज अ वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर एवरी. आई मीन, जल ही जीवन हम कहते हैं, राइट? वाटर इज लाइफ. But how the stress on the water is increased so many times that now there is an acute scarcity of water supply. And why water is important? Because if you look into the history, every civilization has evolved only and only in places where you have water. And whenever there is no water, life forms cannot exist. Correct? So अभी क्या हो रहा है, अगर आप अर्बन एरियाज में खासकर देखें और ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में भी देखें कि भाई आज से 50 साल पहले क्या होता था. Nobody had this water pumps in their house. और आज शहरों में आप देख लें, अगर आपके घर में अच्छा सबमर्सिबल पंप नहीं है वाटर का, तो आपके घर में पानी जो म्युनिसिपल वाला आता है वो पहुंचेगा ही नहीं, है ना? मैं अगर दिल्ली की बात करूं जहां हम रहते हैं, जो पुराने मकान यहाँ बने हैं वहां सभी में सबमर्सिबल लगा हुआ है. उससे क्या होता है, whenever you 24/7 वाटर सप्लाई है, you switch on the submersible, use the water as much as you like, कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है. लेकिन पिछले 10-15 सालों में दिल्ली सरकार ने इस चीज को समझा है कि अगर वाटर टेबल, बिकॉज एवरी टाइम these people are using submersibles, unmindful exploitation of water resources, what is happening? The water table is going down. And because urban areas are a concrete network where finding soil is very difficult, so rain में जो भी थोड़ी बहुत रेन होती है, वाटर जो हमारा टेबल अंडरग्राउंड वाटर टेबल है उसको रिचार्ज करने का बहुत कम टाइम मिलता है, right? So basically we are shrinking our water resources, and if we are not having proper regulation and their implementation, then, and you know that who is likely to face the most difficult impact? अगर वाटर की कमी होगी या किसी भी संसाधन की कमी होगी, सबसे ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट किस पे होगा? समाज के जो भी कमजोर वर्ग के लोग हैं, सबसे ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट उन्हीं पे होगा. क्यों? क्योंकि अगर आप चूंकि मैं डेमोग्राफी का आदमी हूं, तो आप इस चीज को समझते हैं कि अगर आप जनसंख्या का घनत्व देखें, पॉपुलेशन डेंसिटी एंड डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन देखें, तो अधिकतम डेंसिटी कहाँ होती है? अगर आप सेटलमेंट्स में देखें तो अधिकतर डेंसिटी उन प्रकार के सेटलमेंट्स में होती है, फॉर एग्जांपल स्लम्स या लो इनकम नेबरहुड्स, right? So there are so for example, on every 1 square kilometer of land area, there are more than 40 to 50,000 people living in Delhi, many times more than that. And if you go to societies which are well off, economically well-to-do societies, you find that the density of population is quite low. So the point is, suppose if the government of Delhi or government of Indore or the municipal corporation has fixed certain standard consumption level of, just to say, tell you, just imagine if suppose 100 liter of water per person per day is a limit. Okay, if suppose that is a limit, होता क्या है, बहुत ही उल्टा सिचुएशन होता है. Those who are staying in economically well-to-do families have maybe more than this standard limit, 200, 300, 400, or there is no upper limit. On the other hand, those who are staying in economically not so well-to-do families, in such family, you find that there is no water at all. So the distribution of water system is so unjudicious according to the need. But then again, people do not have power to go and challenge the state or the government to get these misalignment corrected. इसकी वजह से क्या होता है, आप कई बार न्यूज़ में देखते होंगे या कई जगह देखते होंगे, you have somebody called water mafias, right, who are illegally trafficking water, selling water, and you don't know the quality of the water, because when there is no water, talking about quality becomes very impractical. So the point is why I'm focusing on water. Just one example, that how in the last 50 to 60 years, with increasing burden of population multiplying many folds, more than 3 times, 4 times. So at the time of independence, India's population was close to around 35 to 40 crores, and today we are 1.4 billion. The size of the land is same. Per capita holding of land is reducing gradually day by day. Per capita availability of water resource is declining. The quality of air is deteriorating. You know that if you look at the top 10 cities which are more polluted in the world, you will find 2 to 3 from India, including Delhi, Kanpur, other places. So the fact of the matter is, it's become very difficult to breathe. It has become very difficult to have drinking water. And another important thing that we are missing today is an open space. Green and clean open space. People living in metropolitan cities in Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai, Bangalore, many such places, finding a quiet, green and clean open space is a very big deal as compared to those who are living in the villages. Of course, even in villages, we find that you have green spaces, there's no doubt, but can we confirm that water supply is the same as it used to be? बचपन में आप लोगों ने हमने भी काफी we all come from village, so we know that how good was the village life. But if you compare, you all are very small, but I don't know, if you talk to your parents and grandparents, you must be knowing it, that how fast the village life has changed in maybe last 25 years. Correct? Most of the wells in the villages have dried up. Most of the hand pump have lost. The underground water is not working. Most of the so-called ponds are drying. I think I was reading somewhere in Madhya Pradesh, there is a place called, what is the name? Bahori Band is a place, I think near Katni somewhere. There in the villages there were local these ponds that will just use to recharge, to store water. Now that is completely, the natural thing has completely dried up, right? तो गांव में भी बहुत ज्यादा फर्क पड़ रहा है. क्यों? क्योंकि अब गांव में भी पॉपुलेशन बढ़ी है, डिमांड बढ़ी है. एग्रीकल्चर के लिए अगर आप एग्रीकल्चर कर रहे हैं, उसमें डाइवर्सिफिकेशन कर रहे हैं, मल्टीपल क्रॉपिंग कर रहे हैं, यू नीड फार मोर वाटर, राइट? और अगर आपका मानसून पैटर्न इरेटिक है, वी डोंट हैव अ रेगुलर मानसून एनी मोर. आई मीन ऑलवेज दैट we all have read together as it is said that agriculture is a gamble with monsoon in India, right? So we all do a gamble because we don't know if this year monsoon is good, what happens tomorrow or next year or day after or the next to next year. It's very difficult, right? So because of the uncertainty of the monsoons, and majority of the farmers depend on the monsoon, we don't know what will happen to our agriculture harvest. Kitna acha crop hoga ya nahi hoga, right? So all these factors, climate change, increasing demand for land, clearing of the forest to make land available for agriculture, to make land available for cities, to make land for dams, all construction activities. From where are we getting this land? I mean, it's not like the earth is expanding. It's not like the border of the country is expanding. It is the same as it used to be 200 years ago, but the demand have multiplied unmindfully number of times. Supply, how can you increase the supply? I was just discussing with my students yesterday, and we were talking about supplies of food. We all need food, and the food practices have now, because of globalization, changed dramatically. As a geographer, we all know that in rural areas or whichever state we come from, there used to be some local popular cuisines which were very seasonal. Seasonal fruits, seasonal vegetables we all used to consume. But today it is like if you are sitting in India anywhere, it's a time of e-commerce, right? You have internet, every 24/7 smartphones. You can buy any vegetables, any fruit from any part of the world or any part of the country, and you can have it if you can afford it, right? Now, I was talking about the quality of the food, and particularly fruits and vegetables and meat and dairy products. There is no dearth of supply. Do you wonder how it is possible? There is no dearth of supply. Whenever you have festive season and you need a lot of dairy products, there is no dearth of supply. And do we wonder from where the supply is coming? Have you ever studied the shrinking population of animal livestock? Quality of animal livestock? Nobody thinks about it, But then the supply is never short. And then we are made to wonder, what are we drinking? What are we eating? Whether it is healthy or not healthy. We know that India is now global capital of diabetes. India is now global capital of several non-communicable chronic disease, right? Why that is the case? This was not the case always. It has become in the last 20, 30 years or so, with application of too much of fertilizers, too much of pesticides, less organic manures, improved variety of seed, genetic modification of the seeds. Now, what is happening? The original diversities of the seeds has gone away. Many species of varieties of rice, pulses, wheat are just being forgotten, or they're completely gone out because they're not being able to compete with what is running in the market, right? You think about apple, you think about anything, variety of any fruit or any grain, variety are now going out. Only a few popular products backed by corporate markets are taking the scene, right? So gradually, what used to be naturally grown in the backyard or in your farms are, because not able to survive with a popular, variety of seed available in the market. So what is happening? The vegetables have not remained healthy anymore. Often we say that one should eat a lot of vegetables, but if you really think whether these vegetables are good or not, you really are not sure. You have to be very careful while washing them as thoroughly as possible. Still, you don't know. Similarly, with if you are eating meat products, right? Whether you are eating whatever you are eating, any meat product, you are having eggs or you are having chicken or you are having mutton, whatever, right? You know that how much chemical is infused in the body to make them grow in a very short span of time. I was just reading somewhere that like in Delhi or NCR region, particularly I'm talking about chicken, like how they make a chicken to grow within 2 weeks from the time it comes out of the egg and it becomes 1.5 or 2 kgs. So they feed for 14, 15 days consecutively without letting the chicken to sleep once. Why? Because they want it to grow as early as possible. Feed uninterruptedly, right? Make sure that the fellow grows quicker and we can sell out and make money. So imagine what are we going to gain from eating such products, because the way they are being, produced. And you also know, if you love fish and other seafood products, how fresh they are. A lot of these fishes, in order to make them look fresh and everything, they put a lot of mercury. Similarly, this is the season of mango. We all are enjoying mangoes, right? And like if you think about mangoes which you buy from market, they look so yellow and so prepared. Do we ever know how they look like? Whether it was happening in the garden, or they have done something. So basically, they use a lot of chemicals to, you know, to make these things look so prepared, well prepared, and ready to eat. Right. So whether it is mango or any other thing, right? So the point is that with this unmindful fascination of profit and growth and progress, somewhere we are missing the line, which is at the end of the day, there will be some cost of all these things. And the cost is before us, the health cost, the environmental cost. And these costs are just not being met by us, but our coming generation as well. Why? Because a lot of things that we have eaten, the natural product, is completely gone. The species is lost. Whether it's the rice, whether it is the pulse, whether it's a fruit or it's a vegetable. A lot of varieties, natural varieties that used to grow, people have forgotten, or simply because it was less competitive in the market. Right? So with every generation, 25 years, 30 years, a lot of these natural products and fruits and vegetables, they are just going away. And we can only read them about in the books. Right? And therefore, we, as a geographer, need to address this issue of continuous interaction between life forms and environment, space, place, and how does it interact with the local flora and fauna. And the subject called biogeography, which is in some sense relatively neglected branch within geography in modern times, unfortunately. But I'm sure if you read more about it, you will be more fascinated about it. I'm sure many of us are fascinated by watching National Geographic, Discovery channels, and such fascinating stories of like how, in the late geological time period, there were very different forms of animals. Their size was very different, their number was very different, and gradually the size is reduced. Many of the species have become extinct. Many of them are right now on the verge of extinction. Can we save them? So-called endangered species. So if you think about biogeography as a branch of geography, it is a science of biodiversity. It is a science to appreciate the evolution, the past, historical past of these biodiversities. Why in certain places you have certain vegetation? Why in certain places do you have certain forest areas? Why in certain places you have certain grassland or scrubs? So what is that factor? Explain these historical patterns. Plus the way things are today, spatial distribution of forest today, or spatial distribution of different animal forms, right? So for example, if you think about tigers, or you think about elephants, you have different forms of these same species, right? So we as a biogeographer try to analyze how with changing time, distribution of various life forms has changed or not changed, and how can we preserve or conserve whatever is exists today, right? So now let me come to our directly to what I want to talk. So with this background, if we try to understand like what is a biogeographer's main concern. So a biogeographer is a person who is occupied with understanding the interrelationship between geography, a science that examines this place. Space and place are integral components of geography, right? So suppose if you want to study, if you look at various definitions of geography, one of the simplest definition is geography is the study of Earth as a home of mankind. Geography is the study of Earth or Earth covering of man, right? So man and environmental relationships, how this relationship exists in different part of the world. So for example, if you take example of India, and you see different settlement patterns in the country. If you compare Gujarat with Assam, if you compare Kashmir with Kanyakumari or Kerala, if you compare Madhya Pradesh with Andhra or Rajasthan, all these settlement patterns exhibit the traditional one, I'm saying, not the modern one. All the traditional settlement pattern, or in Maharashtra, they exhibit the adjustment of human beings with their immediate natural environment, right? हम लोग ने एग्जांपल जरूर पढ़ा है इग्लू का, आप सब लोग इग्लू जानते हैं, जो भी स्नो कैप्ड एरियाज होते हैं, राइट? Because mostly for a long period of or the large number of months in a year, people are residing in these closed igloos, or even in Ladakh or Leh or such places. When you have winters, people don't come out for 6 or 7 months. So outside it is extremely cold. Many times temperature is -20 to -30 degrees, but within their house it is very warm. So how these traditional settlement patterns, housing patterns, is an striking example of the adjustment that people have made to learn and live with the nature. But today, with technology going so ahead, we are modifying it to a great extent, and the impacts are clear in the form of the ozone layer being depleting. You are facing acid rain situations. I remember 2-3 years ago in Delhi, there were 2-3 days when it was very difficult to say whether it's a morning, it's afternoon, it was evening. It was completely dark. Delhi was choked. One could not barely, breathe properly. It was like entire city was becoming like a gas chamber. Not many years ago. I think it was like 4 years ago. Entire Delhi was like gas chamber. Literally, you cannot breathe. You cannot see anything. Such kind of situation happened. So why does it happen? Because while adjusting with the nature, we probably break the system to such an extent that the natural equilibrium was disturbed, and the result was that the nature will take its own course, and the cost will be paid by us. So as a geographers, our major occupation is to study, particularly biogeographers, they study the interlinkages between geography as a science, ecology, and evolution of things. So what is an ecology? Now, ecology basically talks about how does different life forms interact with the local environment to survive, right? So there are different ecological systems. For example, mountain ecology, plain ecology. In the plateau, you have a different ecology. So you have different set of environmental conditions. You have different resources, different constraints, and then how various life forms adjust, survive, grow, evolve, diversify, disperse, and then some of them extinct, some of them modify and continue surviving, right? So this interaction between geography and ecology is the key thing in biogeography, because biogeography is a science that talks about the spatial distribution of various life forms, including both trees, plants, forests, and other animals, or which may be different kinds of animals, including human beings, right? So biogeographers studies that how these local conditions or local environmental conditions provide a playing field on which different life forms evolve, develop, multiply. They compete with each other. Some of them survive, some of them are not able to survive. And suppose if like there is a life form on a given piece of land for thousands of years, and then suddenly for some reasons this land form bifurcates and become two parts, right? Then what happens? Same species that was living together thousands of years ago, after the bifurcation of this great land mass, now drifts into different directions, now exposed to different ecological conditions, different climatic conditions, different environmental conditions, different set of exposures. So the same species in the next thousands of years is again going to, adjust itself with the new environment, and you find a lot of changes in that species as well. So basically starting from a same population, same species, now with different geography and different ecology, the same thing is going to look much different maybe thousands years down the line. So that is the crux of this biogeography, a science that is concerned with understanding the spatio-temporal distribution of different life forms. So you go to geological time periods. I will take some example in few minutes. I'll show what I'm talking about. So we go back to the geological time period since the life form came on the Earth, how the Earth was considered as a static phenomena, and the life form on the surface of the Earth was considered as the dynamic players. For example, climate was considered as a dynamic player. So basically the idea was that the variety or the diversity of the life form millions of years ago was an outcome of the variability in the climate condition. That was the major. So for a long period of time, so let me tell you one more thing. In biogeography, when you think about theories and hypotheses and explanations, so these are all tentative hypotheses, tentative explanations, right? Because you never know when we come out with certain new findings, some fossil evidence of trees or some fossil evidence of some animals, and then we say, okay, whatever the explanation was given previously probably doesn't stand or hold true today, right? So therefore, the occupation, the major concerns when you are doing a biogeography study, you are basically looking at the past, present, and predicting the future patterns of various life form on the surface of the Earth. Not only do you describe it, but you also explain them, or you try to explain them. There can be no perfect explanation, but some reasoned explanation based on the fossil evidences. That you can determine the age of the fossil, and then you can say, okay, this tree was, because if you find a tree, every tree has got its own constitution, genetic constitution, DNA, plus you also know what kind of environmental minimum requirement condition was needed for this plant to grow. So suppose if you think you know that this Himalaya is a very recent mountain, fold mountain, and before that there was a sea, and then with plate tectonic forces coming in, the entire sea was pressurized, and whatever the material was there in the sea led to the formation of the Himalayas, correct? I'm not a perfect physical geographer, but what I remember is this, something like this, right? So then what happened? These fossils are the major resources to uncover the history and geography of various life forms. Basically this. So if you go, you know that a fossil is nothing but the remains of various life forms submerged within the surface of the earth, subject to various degree of temperature and various insects and so basically this transforms and then you try to read the age. कार्बन डेटिंग के थ्रू आप उसकी एज को असरटेन कर सकते हैं। साथ ही साथ आप ये भी जानते हैं कि अगर किसी एक पर्टिकुलर टाइप का प्लांट है जो कि सिर्फ टेम्परेट क्लाइमेट में ही ग्रो कर सकता है, तो अगर वो आपको आज कहीं प्लेन इलाके में उसका फॉसिल मिलता है तो ये चीज़ को प्रूव करता है कि हो सकता है कि ये लैंड मास मूव किया हो सकता है कि नहीं हो सकता है। सो बहुत तरीके के इस प्रकार के एविडेंस हैं जो मैं आपको कुछ देर में शेयर करूंगा, जो इस चीज को बताते हैं कि thousands and hundreds and millions of years ago, distribution of the landforms on the surface of the earth was very different than it is today, and how over changing time and changing climate, different geological eras, the distribution of life forms have changed. The biodiversity has been changing. Various species have born, survived. Some of them lost. Some of them became extinct. Some of them were able to survive. They had mutated into different forms. है ना? आज के दौर में अगर आप बात करें, the unfortunate COVID virus, this is also a kind of a life form virus, right? What do we know about it? We know its genetic composition, we know its DNA, we know that it is very rapidly mutating, taking various forms, affecting different people at different times. We are not able to find out how to find a vaccine so that it can be completely controlled because it is changing very quickly, right? So similarly, if you look at different other life forms, of course they cannot change and become so disastrous, but it's something like this only, right? Various life forms, whether they are trees, whether they are birds, they are mammals, whatever, they also evolve with time. They also change with time. They also need minimum condition to survive, to eat, to grow. And when these conditions are, for some reason not exist, then these life forms also, they are unable to exist. For example, whenever you see a rainy season comes, so typically you will find a lot of flies in the air. So if you go and walk near any street side lights, you find that a lot of these. So basically, I think they are nothing but mosquitoes, and during rains, all of them get their wings, and then and their life is very short, less than 24 hours. So basically, these mosquitoes, insects, they fly, and then they die. So within 24 hours. So some life forms have a very short span of life. Some have very long. So for example, you know about tortoise. They can survive how many years? Hundreds of years, 200 years, 250 years also I've heard or read somewhere. Tortoise can survive, right? Human being can survive up to maximum 150 years, right? So different life. Trees have a very fairly long lifespan, many hundreds of years. But there are many life forms that die, and they're born, they live and die within 24 hours, right? So we as biogeographers try to analyze how the local ecology plays the determining role on the origin, sustenance, diversification, dispersal, and extinction of different life forms on the surface of Earth. Second, we as a geographer who use history, that is the element of time, and geography as an element of space, analyze these constraints on living over time and space. For example, अगर आप ecology की बात कर रहे हैं, जो कि basically you can think about ecology as a stage which provides you minimum requirement for living. What do you need? You need land, you need air, you need water, you need oxygen, some basic elements. पांचों जो पदार्थीय तत्व होते हैं जिससे निर्माण होता है पदार्थ का, राइट? सो ऑल दीज थिंग्स we analyze ecological changes over time, that is history, and across space, that is geography. And we try to explain how over history and across geographies, ecological things are changing that is leading to change in different life forms. Either they are able to survive, some of them survive, some of them not survive. And we will talk about Darwin's theory of evolution and natural selection, which was used many times by these biogeographers to explain why certain life forms could survive, others could not, and the survival for the fittest thing, right? So therefore, biogeographers try to address this question of why do organisms live where they do, है ना? तो जहां पर भी जिस प्रकार की जीवन के प्रकार पाए जाते हैं, चाहे वो जीव जंतु हो, चाहे वो वनस्पति हो, चाहे वो ह्यूमन पॉपुलेशन हो, कोई भी पॉपुलेशन हो, कोई भी स्पीशी हो, तो अगर वो कहीं पाए जाते हैं, सो वी हैव टू एक्सप्लेन कि ये यहीं पे क्यों पाए जाते हैं, है ना? What is the history? Were they born here, or they have come from some other place of origin, right? If they were not born here from the beginning, or if they have migrated to this place, then what was their origin? What was the story of their migration, right? And why it is important to know all these things? It is important to know all these things because if we care about the conservation, the preservation, and sustainability of environment and space, we need to know why certain species multiply and grow faster in any conditions versus there are some species which do not go, and they are very delicate and could not even survive in any foreign environment, right? So therefore I think therefore I highlighted this thing that there are various questions that I'm going to discuss which biogeographers try to address, and the most basic one is this: why when you talk about organisms, it includes both flora and fauna, vanaspati and jeev jantu, why they live where they live, so for example, if you have to decide, if you are given ample resources in the world, and if you are asked, Nirvara ji, if you want to live in any part of the world, which place you will prefer to live? Or Satyam ji, if you are asked, which part of the world you want to go to live if there is no constraint on resources? Many of us would prefer to go to villages, many of us would go to coast, many of us would prefer to go to mountains, So what is that a set of factors which influences your decision? Many times, we can ask these questions, but many life species are not able to ask, but they only survive in certain situations. Otherwise, they are not able to survive. For example, fish. Simple example. Can fish survive out of water? Not at all. If you think about camels, with camels, इसको बोलते हैं डेजर्ट का जहाज, है ना? डेजर्ट का जहाज क्यों बोलते हैं? Because not only it can simply run and looks like it's flying on the desert for a very long distance, but it requires he is very fuel efficient in some sense, right? He or she can have water resources and can store it, quite a substantial amount of water, maybe 20 liters or 15 liters something, and can walk in the scorched heat and desert for a long distance. So in the desert area, you can have only camels. You cannot have horse. You cannot have elephants because they do not have adapted to the ecology of deserts. Correct? So therefore, so that is the basic thing. Why do organisms live where they do? They do, right? Now there are some definitions that I wanted to I don't know, I'd like to read, but there are some important things conceptual that I have to tell. So if you look at, so I think there are three things which are important in biogeography: ecology, history, and geography. We talk about ecology because that provides the basic platform, minimum things required for sustaining life, right? what is the local land condition, what is the local climate condition, what is the local food supply, what is the local threats, competition. So this, and how this ecology has evolved over time, changing over time and likely to change in future, and how these ecological conditions vary between places. Because ultimately the differences in geography is what explains the differences in biodiversity. Now, if you think about how ecological factors play a role, I think this is an important slide. Please try to pay attention. So how these ecological factors really work. So there are two ways through which these ecological factors work. The first thing is the characteristics of the species itself, or the characteristics of the population itself. So population could be of fish, it could be of bird, it could be of snake, any species, right? So every species has got its unique DNA, genetic composition, its own life history, its own reproduction rate. And I think today in COVID times, we all know what is the reproduction rate, how quickly a given organism or a given life form multiplies or can multiply, how quickly or slowly. That is also very important, because if the species are not rapidly multiplying, then chances of them to survive for a long time is not easy. But if the species are easily and rapidly multiplying, then chances of them surviving for a long time is there. So every species or every population have got their distinct genetic composition, a very distinct life trajectory, a very distinct reproduction rate, they multiply, a very different behaviors. Some of the life forms are very defensive, some of them are very lazy, some of them are very hardworking. For example, look at that, the best example in the world on hard work is the ant. Look at the dedication, look at the patience, look at the group work, the teamwork which the ant does, right? So wherever you are sitting, you will find, of course, some ants. And if you just happen to drop some edible out around you, you will see from anywhere you will find some ant coming. God knows from where the ant will come. They will come as a team, one by one, very orderly, right? So linear term में चलेंगे, एक के पीछे एक चलेंगे, right? और जो भी खाने का पदार्थ होगा धीरे धीरे देखिए वो एकदम kind of evaporate हो जाएगा, गायब हो जाएगा. So basically telling you about behaviors. In terms of behavior, there are other life forms which are very aggressive. Some are very lazy. The best example of lazy is, tortoise. But slow and steady wins the race anyway. So just telling you these things, just to give you an example that behaviors of these animals or the life form is very different. Similarly, trees also, or plants also. Changing seasons, and you look at the color of the trees changing very. So you have autumn, everything is red. You have these monsoon season coming. If you have ever been to the southern part of India or the Western Ghats or go to Northeast or maybe in your neighborhood also, everything is and anything is now very green, right? So therefore, the behaviors of trees or different plants or animals, everything changes. Then question comes, how frequent or how able these life forms are for dispersal. Do they have a capacity to move out of their local ecological conditions and survive in new foreign ecological conditions? Whether the species has this ability to do that or not. I think the human population in this case is the best example. Like, we have learned to live and survive in every condition across the world. चाहे डेजर्ट में रहना हो हम रहते हैं, चाहे ओशन कोस्ट के सामने रहना हो हम रहते हैं, माउंटेन, प्लेटो, we've adjusted to live with everywhere, right? And then so on. So basically saying that when you think about ecosystem, so there are two important concepts. The first component or the first concept is about population of the species itself. Population of the species or the living organism, whether it's flora and fauna itself. What is its genetic composition? DNA. That determines a lot of things about it. Then of course its own life history. कहते हैं ना, जो कंपनी बहुत पुरानी होती है वो आगे भी चलती रहती है, जो कंपनी न्यू है वी डोंट नो वेदर इज गोइंग टू लास्ट. अभी तो आपको जी मार्केट में 2 साल हुआ है, हाउ डू वी ट्रस्ट यू? बट अ कंपनी दैट इज रनिंग फॉर hundreds of years, we can trust. It's a brand. Likewise, every species have its own life history, its own journey, own struggle. Some of them have survived, some of them have not survived. So if a species is there surviving over millions of years, there must be something special about its constitution, genetic makeup, and life's history. Of course, reproduction rate. If it is reproducing and replacing each other frequently, of course, it's likely to survive for a long time. Behavior. It's very aggressive, it's very lazy, it's very hardworking, different kinds of behavior. Then, of course, whether it has a capacity to move out of its own ecology and survive somewhere else. So basically, these characteristics or the traits of a specific species or a population affects the response. So basically it's saying that, I don't want to read it, I hate reading. So basically it's saying that depending upon these characteristics of every individual species, it determines whether it can live or not live in different environmental conditions. So therefore this is something which is called in biogeography as analytical biogeography. So analytical biogeography is a branch of biogeography that basically deals with individual species or populations, looks at their constitution, looks at their characteristics, their individual history, looks at about their behavior, their reproduction patterns, their travel, basically dispersal, so everything. So basically trying to analyze the individual species and how these have evolved or changed over time. So that is one, because every species is different. It has own advantages, disadvantages, and that determines whether it can survive for a long period of time or not. So such kind of analysis is done by a subfield of biogeography called analytical biogeography. The other side is the biological response of such species to the environment, which is known as ecological biogeography. अब ये क्या है जी, इसमें हम ये कह रहे हैं कि जी जो पहला कंपोनेंट था वो ये था कि वी वांटेड टू लर्न अबाउट द इंडिविजुअल स्पीशीज, जिसको हम बोलते हैं एनालिटिकल बायोजियोग्राफी. इन्वायरमेंटल बायोजियोग्राफी, सॉरी, इकोलॉजिकल बायोजियोग्राफी में हम क्या करते हैं, हियर वी वांट टू से और हियर वी वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ द इन्वायरमेंट determines response of each species or each population. You see my point? So here the environment which used to provide the platform. So basically we are saying that environment here, when you talk about ecological biogeography, we want to see how environment is, you can say maybe predicting or providing exposure to the life forms and whether they can survive or not. So when you think about ecological biogeography, we talk about various kind of ecological settings and how do they in fact influence these various species or population or life forms. Now, how this ecological biogeography works. So basically there are two sets of factors in this ecological environment that influence the life forms of both plants and animals. And I've highlighted them here. The first one is abiotic, right? Which is basically means factors which have no life. So which are physical factors and chemical factors. So we know that we need certain basic minimum physical, environmental or chemical conditions to survive. So what are these abiotic factors? अजैविक भी बोलते हैं इनको. So abiotic environmental factors include factors such as temperature conditions, right? So for example, if any species has to survive, there has to be optimum temperature conditions. The best example is agriculture. You see, if you have to grow a particular crop, you cannot just grow that crop any time of the year, because you know that every year there are different seasons, right? So अगर आपको चावल की खेती करनी है तो आप चावल के पौधे को कब सो करेंगे, उसमें कितना वाटर चाहिए, कितना टेम्परेचर चाहिए, तभी आप कर सकते हैं. ऐसे ही एक और अच्छा एग्जांपल हो सकता है जो रेशम की खेती करते हैं लोग, राइट? तो वो भी ये जानते हैं भाई रेशम को, कीड़ों को अगर काम करना है तो उसको कुछ मिनिमम टेम्परेचर कंडीशन चाहिए, तभी वो काम करेगा। सिमिलरली अगर आप पाउल्ट्री का काम करते हैं तो उसमें भी टेम्परेचर कंडीशन। सो बेसिकली एवरी लाइफ फॉर्म्स कैन ओनली सर्वाइव if there is a required temperature conditions, and if any there is any systematic variation extremes, बहुत ठंडा या बहुत cold हो गया, then there will be failure of the crop or there will be failure of the life forms. Similarly, light is also very important because you know about the photosynthesis. Sunlight is extremely important. अगर आप सोचिए दुनिया में 24 घंटे अगर लाइट ही ना हो, नेचुरल लाइट की हम बात कर रहे हैं, तो दुनिया में क्या होगा? Try to imagine. There are some part in the world where 6 महीने तक दिन रहता है, 6 महीने तक रात रहती है ना? And their life is very difficult. आप सोचो आपको टाइम का पता नहीं चलेगा, 24 घंटे आपको खाली जो है दिन दिख रहा है, 24 घंटे आपको रात दिख रही है. They are very difficult conditions to live, right? So therefore life forms are very critical. If there is no light, there is no life. चाहे वो आप देखें, जो हमारा सबसे बेस्ट एग्जांपल है बर्ड्स. सवेरे होते हैं सबसे पहले हमको गुड मॉर्निंग करने आते हैं, सुबह 5-6 बजे सनराइज के साथ ही पूरा फ्लॉक एक साथ उड़ के जाता है, और शाम होते होते सूर्यास्त के पहले, सनसेट के पहले सब लोग घर जाते हैं एक साथ, फिर दुबई फ्लॉक में. दे आर वेरी मच क्लियर विद द डे एंड द नाइट टाइमिंग्स. प्लस आपको ये भी पता होगा कि जब भी नेचर में कुछ भी अवांछित घटना होने वाली होती है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर अर्थक्वेक का आभास होता है, सबसे पहला सेंस ये ऑर्गेनिजम्स, लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स को मिलता है, चाहे वो बर्ड्स हो, चाहे वो डिफरेंट एनिमल्स हो. दे स्टार्ट टू बिहेव इन अ वेरी डिफरेंट वे. दे स्टार्ट टू येल, शाउट, मेकिंग नॉइजेस. और जैसे ही ये साउंड आना शुरू हो जाए, आप समझ जाइए कि अब कुछ होने वाला है. और ये बस ये आप सबने, कई लोगों ने फील भी किया होगा, जहाँ पे अगर आपने कभी अर्थक्वेक वगैरह आपने फेस किया होगा, तो जैसे ही अर्थक्वेक आने वाला होता है 30 सेकंड पहले इन लोगों का साउंड आना शुरू हो जाता है. सो दे हैव अ वेरी गुड सेंस, राइट? सो देयरफॉर लाइट, वेदर इट्स टेम्परेचर, है ना, देयर आर मेनी लाइफ स्पीशीज दैट कैन ओनली सर्वाइव इन कोल्ड एरियाज. फॉर एग्जांपल आप पेंगुइन की बात कर लें या पोलर बेयर की बात कर लें, है ना. बहुत सारे ऐसे जीव जंतु हैं जो सिर्फ कोल्ड एरियाज में ही पाए जाते हैं. और बहुत सारे ऐसे प्रोडक्ट जो, अब आम की खेती जो है, आम की खेती तो कोल्ड एरिया में हो नहीं सकती है. यू नीड ट्रॉपिकल कंडीशंस, है कि नहीं? लेकिन हाँ, सेब की जो खेती होती है वो प्लेन में नहीं हो सकती है. तो आप जब भी सेब के बारे में बात करेंगे, किन्नौर का सेब हो या कश्मीर का सेब हो, सेब वहीं पे होते हैं ठंडे इलाकों में, है ना. सेब कभी भी गर्म इलाकों में नहीं हो सकते, राइट? ऐसे मैंगो, मैंगो आप कभी नहीं पाएंगे ठंडे इलाकों में मैंगो की खेती होती है, राइट? सो यू नीड सर्टेन क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस टू ग्रो वेदर इट्स वेरियस लाइफ फॉर्म, चाहे वो फ्लोरा हो चाहे वो fauna हो. Now soil is another important element which is very critical with regard to existence of different life forms on the surface of earth. So आप ये जानते हैं what is a soil? Soil is nothing but a mineral, right, out of the rocks. Degradation of rocks, application of water, various temperature, rainfall, slope, lot of factors determine the formation of soil. But ultimately all soils are not same, right? बिकॉज जो जिस भी मिनरल से सॉइल बनती है उसका एक अलग कैरेक्टरिस्टिक होता है, उसकी अपनी फर्टिलिटी होती है, उसका अपना एक ऑर्गेनिक कंपोजिशन होता है. सो सॉइल डिटरमाइंस व्हाट कैन यू ग्रो और यू कैन नॉट ग्रो, राइट? एंड इंडिया में तो आप जानते हैं वी हैव वेरी वेराइटी ऑफ सॉइल्स, स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम द ब्लैक सॉइल इन द वेस्ट, गुजरात ले लें या आप महाराष्ट्र ले लें, बहुत इलाकों में आपको ब्लैक सॉइल मिलती है, रेड सॉइल मिलती है ना. और इधर आप प्लेन एरिया में जाएंगे तो आपको एलुवियल सॉइल मिलती है, फर्टाइल सॉइल मिलती है, राइट? सो लॉट ऑफ वेराइटीज ऑफ सॉइल आर देयर. सो व्हाई दे आर इम्पोर्टेंट? बिकॉज डिफरेंट कंस्टिट्यूशन ऑफ द सॉइल determines what can you grow or not grow. And of course, over the time, as we have seen, in order to produce unlimited amount of food and products, gradually, because soil has its own natural fertility, and if we spoil them or we modify them in order to produce as much as we want, then of course there will be a lot of problem. And that is what being seen many places. Soil have become alkaline or acidic, losing its natural fertility. because of waterlogging and other things. Many times industrial waste, and which is so makes such a foul smell. I happen to come from eastern part of UP, so when you cross from Varanasi and come towards Delhi, you know about the mills that produce जो दरी का काम होता है, राइट, बहुत फेमस है मिर्जापुर उस इलाके में. कालीन का काम होता है, right? So and just one example, I'm just giving one example, right? So whatever this wastewater which is discharged from these industrial units, it is so dangerous for the environment. It makes such a horrible kind of a smell. I tell you, it becomes very difficult to pass through the ground when you're traveling on a bus or a train for 15-20 minutes. This entire area smells like anything, right? So just to give an example, if such kind of untreated industrial waste are being discharged on the soil, you imagine what kind of contamination and destruction we are doing, irreparable to the soil, है ना? तो अगर soil नहीं है तो भाई productivity कहाँ से आएगी? So therefore soil does play an important role. Then comes the geology. Of course, soil and geology are interrelated, right? So geological structure, geological composition of the land and the landforms is again very important, because if you look at Deccan Plateau, you compare the Deccan Plateau with the northern part of the country, which is plain, and then you have the young mountains in the Himalayas. So all these landforms have emerged or evolved in different geological time periods due to different processes. And you know about the rocks, the rock formations. There are different kinds of rocks. Some of them are igneous rocks, some of them are sedimentary rocks, some of them are metamorphic rock. So all the different kinds of rocks, their geological composition determines the different life forms which can sustain. So therefore I'm saying why geology is important, because अगर आप sedimentary rocks के बारे में बात करें जो जिसमें बहुत ज़्यादा फॉसिल पाया जाता है, तो वहाँ पे अगर आप लाइफ फॉर्म्स की डाइवर्सिटी देखेंगे, इट्स remarkably different than if you're talking about area which is actually made up from the what I said, igneous rocks, right, made of the magma of the volcanic eruptions, right? So there are different geological structures has a very direct role upon the biodiversity that you see, है कि नहीं? Then of course topography, slope, and also determines the the biodiversity. For example, if you look at mountains, है ना, and if you look at different altitudes, so as you grow, as you move from lower stretch of the mountains or these towards the upper reaches and the highest reaches, so जो tree line होती है एक limited level तक होती है. After a while it's very difficult to find trees or anything else. Then you have snow-capped mountains, right? So the topography is again very important, because the slope and the height and the altitude determines the different life forms that you can see. Then of course fire, and fire is an other important element, and these days we are seeing that in different parts of India and also in different parts of the world, that these fire also are various threat to the various life forms. So in Australia it is always in news, that you have these forest fires for number of days and weeks, and then entire forest area or many part of the forest area is destroyed because of this thing. Then of course water and air current is very obvious. Without water you cannot have, and most of these life forms need water and fresh air to grow, survive, and sustain itself. So these are some of the abiotic factors. Thinking about the biotic factors for the species or for the different population to survive, first of the important factor is the competition between species themselves, which is very important, and this is what Charles Darwin also explained, the competition between its own people, and competition for survival, right? So different species surviving together, and then there is a limited availability of resources. So whichever can able to handle and adjust and exploit those resources, then that can survive for a longer time. So when there is a competition, only the best can survive. So that is how the biotic environment can work. Second is, of course, there are various parasites, diseases, predators. All these other biotic elements also influence the life history or the life stories of various life forms, है ना. तो अगर आप soil को देखते हैं, उनकी fertility को देखते हैं, you know, you need these elements in the soil to maintain their fertility. Then talks about diseases, right? आप देखते हैं चाहे वो plant हो चाहे वो animal हो, if they are fallen sick to some disease, of course then their life is under threat, है ना. तो खासकर अगर आप पौधों के बारे में देखें, so normally we put a lot of pesticides and a lot of chemicals, you know, insecticides, you know, to make sure that our you know, maybe our fruit or maybe our whatever we are producing is free from insects or free from parasites, right? So all these elements together decide, biotic and abiotic, the ecological distribution of flora and fauna. And over time also, because these condition doesn't remain static, rather they are dynamic. So as these biotic environment and abiotic environment component change, they have a very strong bearing upon the distribution of life forms across the surface of the earth. I want to skip this. Okay, we can skip this also. Now there are some basic questions which are the primary occupation of biogeographers to explain. So if you look at some of these important questions, which are the fundamental questions, and of course these are not the exhaustive list, but some of the important questions that a biogeographers always seeks to answers. First is, which I think we have now discussed, why is a species confined to its present range? Present range means spatial distribution, right? So if you look at any flora or if you look at any fauna, why it is confined or limited to a given spatial distribution? कहने का मतलब ये है कि अगर आप फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आप फॉरेस्ट का डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन देखें या ट्रीज का डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन देखें, टेम्परेट एरियाज में या फिर हायर ऑल्टीट्यूड में you find different kinds of trees, and as you come down, for example in tropical areas close to equator, you find far more dense forest. As you go toward the temperate area, higher latitudes, close to like 40 or 45 degrees, you don't have such kinds of density of the trees or the forest. So if you look at these forest distribution patterns, we have to wonder and try to understand, why is it the tropical forest and they are so dense and they are I mean, of course there are various organisms living in these areas. So we wonder why such plants or why such trees or forests cannot exist in the temperate areas, and why something in the temperate areas cannot come to the tropical areas. So, and wondering about these and thinking about these and trying to explain this is an important task of the biogeographers, because you need, as I said, the certain ecological conditions, both biotic and abiotic, in order for a life form to survive, to grow, to diversify, to sustain itself. And there are very limited species of flora and fauna which you can grow anywhere, है ना. So हमारे यहाँ कहते हैं ना कि like in our local language, there is a क्या कहते हैं unwanted जिसको बोलते हैं vegetation in the eastern part of UP, जिसको बोलते हैं बेहया का पेड़, right? बेहया का पेड़ बोलते हैं, right? Unwanted thing, right? So it doesn't require anything, you don't want it to grow, but that is so genius. I don't know. It grows everywhere and anywhere, right? Even if you cut it, you throw it, it will still come out, it will still evolve. ऐसे I think I am not able to recall perfectly, but I think I read, I think in Bengal or somewhere on the river side, you have these kinds of vegetation that you don't want to grow, but they grow like anything. I think Britishers brought from outside and then they planted it here, and then it was a big disaster, right? So there are certain species, unfortunately, which are genius, right? They can just prevail and grow like anything, but there are exceptions everywhere. So keeping exceptions aside, हम ये जानते ज़रूर हैं कि for anything to grow, survive and have a long lifespan, you need certain ecological conditions. So therefore, the limitation, the spatial limitation or the spatial range of species confirm that there are certain minimum ecological requirements needed for survival of any flora and fauna forms. And therefore, we try to explain them what are the ecological conditions that can sustain and support a given life form in a given geography, given spatial range. Second is what enables a species to live where it does and what prevent it from colonizing other areas, right? So basically it's saying that why there are, what ecological conditions restrict the location of a species to a specific area, and why they are not able to colonize, means go and survive in other foreign areas, right? So that is also one of the important considerations. So similar simple example is like apple I give you, right? So apple can only grow in temperate conditions or cold areas. You cannot grow apricot, apple, जितने भी बढ़िया बढ़िया fruits के नाम आप सोच सकते हैं, आलू बुखारा हो, खुमानी हो, all red and beautiful things. And आजकल चेरी का भी टाइम आ गया है ना, नहीं लीची का टाइम आ गया है. You know that lychee is very famous. Lychee in India is produced in Bihar, a place called Muzaffarpur. So अगर आपको best quality of lychee खाने हो, you have to buy from that place or get some friend from there. So there is a something. अगर आपको अगर वो क्या कहते हैं best अमरूद खाने हो, right, you have to go to Allahabad and buy them. अगर मैंगो की बात करनी हो तो मलिहाबाद का मैंगो बहुत फेमस होता है लखनऊ के पास. So basically there is something which is very special, very distinct in different places that can allow to support the life and sustainability of life forms. And because of these ecological conditions, which if in other places do not prevail, then of course these life forms cannot be transferred, they cannot disperse to other places, right? So therefore this ecology plays a very significant role. Third is how do climate, topography and its interaction with other organisms play a role in limiting the distribution of species. So again, talking about biotic and abiotic factors, how they can together determine the distribution of species across space and over time. Next important question that these biogeographers look to answer is how do different kinds of organisms replace each other as we go up a mountain or as we move from a rocky shore to a sandy beach. तो आप कभी भी अगर I'm sure many of you have been to oceans and sea beaches. So if you look at this sea beach या ocean shore में अगर आप जाते हैं, तो if you move across because that the sea shore is very large, many kilometers. So if you walk around, और अगर आप एक ऐसे इलाके में जाते हैं जहाँ पे थोड़ा सा you have some rocky kind of structures across the sea shore, you get a very different kinds of sea animals, right? So you find a lot of crabs and other things that are there. But if you are just walking on the main seashore without any rocks and other things, आपको ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. You basically find sheep, जो छोटे-छोटे जो मोती वगैरह मिलते हैं, that only you get, right? So basically saying that if you walk around even across a coastline, across different geographies, you find different kinds of animals and life forms. Similarly, if you think about mountain and look at different altitude of the mountain, so as you walk from the bottom and you go walking up the mountain, you will find striking differences in the life forms, whether they are trees, whether they are animals, and maybe the fruits, So you need a certain minimum temperature. So अगर आपको कभी उत्तराखंड या हिमाचल या कश्मीर जाने का मौका मिले, please try to experience these diversities, right? कि कैसे कैसे एप्पल में भी वैरायटी चाहिए, टेस्ट में अगर वैरायटी चाहिए, so you need to walk to different heights to get those things, right? So therefore these are, so basically I'm not talking something which is very difficult or very new. Maybe some of you or many of you have seen yourself, that how with changing mountain conditions by virtue of height, changing temperature conditions, maybe the quality of soil, you have different products or different fruits being produced as compared to others at the lower reaches of the mountains. Now, how did a species come to be confined to its present range, right? So again, it is the thing that, if you're looking at various life forms, for example, mangoes or apples, or if you think about camels, right? Why they are only restricted to a given area? What are the factors that determine those things? So I want to emphasize that there are two factors which determine these things. And please remember this thing. One is the characteristics of the species and population itself, and second thing is the ecological factors, which is biotic and abiotic. So these two important functions together decide how long and how far or how less spatial distributions of a species exist or not. Then what are the closest relative of a given species and where they are found, where did its ancestor live. तो कहने का मतलब ये है कि अगर आप एलिफेंट्स को देखें, दुनिया में एलिफेंट तो भाई एलिफेंट ही होता है, राइट? उसके बॉडी में, उसके अपीयरेंस में, उसके परफॉर्मेंस में कोई ज़्यादा फर्क नहीं मिलता, लेकिन तभी भी आप देखते हैं कि दुनिया के अलग अलग भागों में एलिफेंट्स के जो जो उसके फीचर्स में थोड़ा सा माइन्यूट डिफरेंसेस होता है, राइट? अगर आप हमारे केरला में साउथ में एलिफेंट देखें, दे आर वेरी वेरी गुड, टॉल एंड energetic and everything, right? If you compare with in South Africa and many other part of the world, you have white elephants also. सफेद हाथी भी होता है ना? हमने बचपन में पिक्चर भी देखी सफेद हाथी के ऊपर, करेक्ट? सो सफेद हाथी और जो हमारा नॉर्मल ब्लैक हाथी होता है, they are from the same family, a same species, but because, and God knows thousands of years ago they were of which color I don't know, but they were the same thing, right? But now being exposed to, maybe because of disintegration of the large continent, जिसको हम बोलते हैं Pangea, they have moved to different climate, different ecology, and because of which they have to modify themselves. That could be one reason. I will shortly show you some of the examples of same species of bird living in a given island for thousands of years. Later that island was bifurcated into two. The upper was subject to colder climate, the lower island moved towards more tropical kind of climate, and therefore the same bird now resembles as two different species, but of course they are of the same species and now they become close relatives. Simple सी बात करें, अगर हम Indian South continent subcontinent की बात कर लें, and if you look at all the countries in the subcontinent, whether it's India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, we were all part of the same greater India, right? And now together today, अगर आप दुनिया से अगर आप साउथ एशिया होकर के अगर आप वेस्ट में जाते हैं, यूरोप में जाते हैं या यूएस में जाते हैं, बाहर कहीं भी जाते हैं, so we all behave and we are always very happy to meet our companion from South Asia, whether they are from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, or Afghanistan. We love and treat them like our brothers and sisters, of course. But again, when we are back to South Asia, then we have become Indian and they become, some of them became not so good friends, right? So कहने का मतलब ये है कि we belong to the same ecology, we same geography, we share similar environment and neighborhood, so we are largely the same, right? But because of certain divisions, in our case it is political, in natural cases it is often geographic, so because of which there are some differences may come, but by and large they are the same species. So I'll show you some pictures at the end. Now, how have these historical events, for example, continental drift or the age of glaciers या ice age की हम बात करते हैं, बहुत सारी movies देखते हैं. So how such events and the recent climate change have shaped species distribution, right? So we know that there have been important landmark events that have taken place. You know about plate tectonics and continental drift theories, So if you know about it, so the Earth is actually moving on various plates. जिसको बोलते हैं plate tectonics forces. There are oceanic ridges. So whenever there is a tension, this plate collide with each other, and you have a lot of seismic events that take place, right? So the theory of continental drift by Alfred Wegener post Second World War confirmed that there was a time when this entire landmass was a grand continent called Pangea, and over the course of time these continents, which were initially together, have drifted apart, and so therefore there are many life forms, both flora and fauna, on the opposite sides, exactly the same behavior or same species characteristics, right? So that also helps to understand and confirm, based on fossils and also because of the behaviors that they show, that these landmasses were in past, they were part of the same great continent, and today they have dispersed. So we as a biogeographers try to understand the impact of these continental drift, the age of glaciation, and of course the recent climate change, how they are shaping the various life forms on the surface of the earth. And then these islands, if you look at this island or any isolated region, they provide a very distinct species of plants and animal than a common non-isolated regions, right? You find a lot of diversity in non-isolated regions, and you find relatively less diversity in isolated region like an island, for example, Australia, Madagascar, or such islands, where you find far more homogeneity as compared to any integrated or less isolated land. So these are some of the questions. I think we are running out of time, so I don't want to go in detail of maybe of some of them. How are isolated oceanic island colonized? Why fewer species on islands? Correct. Many species in tropics. Okay. Of course, we also know that in tropical areas, which are closer to the equator, we find that there is a huge diversity of the life forms, both flora and fauna. But that is not the case in the Arctic area or in the temperate zone, because of the very difficult ecological condition. When the temperature is largely always less, and you have mostly snow-capped areas, you don't have congenial environment for the life forms to grow and diversify. So you find a lot of limited variety in this temperate and Arctic latitudes. Whereas when you talk about tropical area where you have warm climate, humid climate, you have large variety of, you have far more biodiversity in the tropical area. So what is that reason and how it can be explained is an important scope of inquiry of biogeographers. Now, I think we are almost getting to the time. So this is one example of a species called tapirs. है ना? So tapir is very much a combination of a horse and it's a type of horse and I think rhinoceros, right? So it is a family member of horse and a rhinoceros. उनका combination है tapir. इसका जो origin हुआ है अगर आप देखें thousands of years ago, it was originated somewhere in Europe and part of Asia, right? And then gradually आप देखें that over the years it has migrated and dispersed on the eastern side and the western side, right? Now अगर आप आज की डेट में देखें, so आप you will never find any tapir in the northern Europe or the northern America. Today these tapirs are only found in East Asia region and Central and South America, right? So originated in Europe, migrated to far main Central Asia, Russia, East Asia and North America, जो हमारे पास हिस्टोरिकल फॉसिल एविडेंस है. लेकिन आज की डेट में जो लिविंग टेपिर्स हैं, ये सिर्फ आपको यहाँ पे अगर आप देखें इंडोनेशिया का जो पार्ट है या बर्मा का जो पार्ट है, यहाँ पे देखने को मिलते हैं, या फिर आप चिली और पेरू जो सेंट्रल आपका जो अमेरिका साउथ अमेरिका है, वहाँ पे ये पाए जाते हैं, राइट? नाउ दे हैव एक्सटिंक्ट फ्रॉम दीज एरियाज, हाई पोलर or cold areas. Basically, they are now found themselves only in the tropical areas, right? So this is a very interesting case of how over the period of time, a species that originated in the temperate climate, basically in cold areas, survive for a long period of time. Even today it is also surviving, but now distribution has changed. Today you don't find them in the cold or temperate areas. You find them closer to equator or in the tropical areas, right? So this is one photograph, real photograph of this tapir, which is a species between rhinos. Rhino को जानते हैं आप, हमारे यहाँ आसाम में बहुत राइनो मिलते हैं, और हॉर्स को आप जानते हैं. So it's a breed between rhino and horse, correct? So this is one classic example of a biogeographical inquiry where basically they are fascinated with the idea of center of origin, and then the idea of dispersal of the life forms across world. So in which ecology it emerged, evolved, and then why it drifted to other places, if it did, and then what is its present stage, if it survives today or not, right? So these are some of the case stories on which these biogeographers work. Now this is an example of a bird known as ring ozul. So basically this actually is a bird of temperate area or cold area, originated in Scandinavian part of the country, of the Europe, and now gradually because of climate change and ocean, the snow area melting, now this has spread to the Mediterranean climate also, and even to closer to Middle East part of Asia. So a bird which was largely emerged, origin was in the Arctic or temperate region, has now spread across Mediterranean and tropical climate, and even part of Middle East Asia also. So that is a gradual story of dispersal of life forms. originating from cold temperate region and gradually migrating to tropical and subtropical warm and relatively less cold climatic conditions. Now, this story I was telling you about a bird, they are same species originally, and this is known as nestor parrots. Now they are known as kaka in the northern part of island of New Zealand, and they are known as kia in the southern part of the New Zealand. So if you look at the map of the world, and if you look at the New Zealand, earlier it used to be a same a single island, but over the years with interplay of the plate tectonics and these forces, they have bifurcated into different islands. So earlier when they were together, this was something like this. After, so basically what happened when these New Zealand islands separated from each other, the northern part where you find this keka species is a land which is more cold area, right? Temperature is cold, it is less warm, less humid, so you find these kinds of features. And when if you look at the southern islands, they are towards equator, and they're relatively less cold and more warm and humid. So you find, I don't know how much difference can you see, but as they tell, because this is also black and white, but they say that there is a lot of difference in their appearance, in their feathers, and also in their behaviors. They are of the same family, but now they look little different than when this entire landmass was a single piece. Yeah, so just a couple of more slides. If you think about the development of the subject of biogeography, so this entire occupation in the early phase of biogeography when the researchers was working was to identify the center of origin of any life forms. कोई भी चीज जो शुरू हुई वो कहाँ पे शुरू हुई, उसका ओरिजिन क्या था, राइट? तो अगर आप मिथिकल टेक्स्ट या फिर अगर आप यूरोप प्री एवोल्यूशनरी टाइम्स में जाएं बिफोर 17th century, so the whole idea according to Christianity was that the entire life form started from somewhere close to Europe, I think close to Turkey, right? And from Turkey, that was the center of origin of various flora and fauna. Gradually, these various life forms have dispersed in different parts of the world, right? So the mythical context is these various life forms were originated somewhere close to Europe and Turkey, and then from there it has dispersed in different part of the world. So this was the conception before Charles Darwin's appear on the scene, right? So this was the time when the largely this was a thought that center of origin is the crux. We have to identify where this life form have originated and how they are dispersed, but they were not able to explain that dispersal thing. With Charles Darwin coming up and giving this theory of evolutionary theory, wherein he said that any life forms has to struggle and survive. So the principle of natural selection, the best will, the whichever is the best will survive, other will be not able to survive. So then this evolutionary theory became the unifying force to explain the biogeographical distribution. And a lot of biogeographers was fascinated by the evolutionary theory of the Darwin, saying that whatever distribution do you see is an outcome of the theory of natural selections over time. All the life forms which have been able to survive changing ecological conditions because of changing climate, changing soil, changing rainfall patterns, changing geological structure, because geological structure also change with time, it's not uniform. So all those life forms that could survive, they were best fitted, they survived, others could not. And therefore even the dispersal pattern can be explained in similar ways. That is, species that can survive into foreign ecological areas or modify themselves, they were successful in dispersing across new foreign ecological areas versus other. Now, in the initial phase of the field of biogeography, Earth was considered as a static entity, and they said that biogeographical or biodiversity was an only outcome of differences between oceanic and climatic conditions, right? Because ocean and climate were considered as dynamic, and Earth was considered as static. Static means you have one landform or a landmass, that is it. There is no movement there. It's static, it's not moving. Whatever differences, so basically if you think about a landform and whatever biodiversity do you see, it's only because of some places you have ocean, some places you have different climate conditions. So because these are dynamic features, so they only determine the biodiversity variations, right? So in the initial phase of biogeographical research. Now later on, with the after Second World War, with the advent of Second World War, the continental drift theory was proposed and widely accepted, criticized and accepted, and then they understood that no, Earth is not static, rather it is dynamic. It's plate tectonics theory was proposed, continental drift theory was proposed. So they realized that no, I mean, if you have to explain the biodiversity, you have to understand that both Earth and climate and ocean together evolve and explain the biodiversity across the surface of the earth. So this is how the ideas in biogeography has been changing over the period of time. And even today, as I said, there is no clear cut exceptional rule or theory or hypothesis that is practiced in the subject, because as you said, if you come out maybe 10 years down the line with some new fossils, can test more theories, right? These are some of the factors which can help to understand the diversity of the species in any area. So if you want, I can share this PowerPoint. I'm very happy to do that if it can help you. So for example, this is a useful example. So if the bold line suggests areas where this factor controls the distribution of species. So for example, if you're talking about tropical areas which are close to equator, biotic factors plays a prominent role in terms of explaining the biodiversities. In the temperate zone, both abiotic and biotic factors works in a similar way. In the polar area, abiotic factors plays a central role in determining the biodiversity. Here again, through this graph, if you see, it shows that as you move from the tropical areas to the polar areas, that is the latitudinal extent, the role of biotic and abiotic factor, how it changed to explain the biodiversity in different areas. This is a diversity hotspot, biodiversity hotspot. So these are the selected part of the world where you get a lot of biodiversity, right? So if you look at the North America, South America, Mediterranean, East Asia, this is Madagascar. So these are certain, and the circle area are the hotspot, basically islands. So islands are also very different. As I said, islands biogeography is very different from the mainland biogeography. Island biogeography is very homogeneous. You find less diversity as compared to the main. Reason being because this is isolated regions, so they are not subject to regular, dispersal from the mainland to the island, right? So whatever the biodiversity is there in these islands, they protect and preserve them. And so there's a lot of research that people are doing on understanding the biodiversity of the islands, how it happened, how it emerged. Some part of explanation is given by continental drift, but afterwards what is happening, and so people are very much fascinated by studying biodiversity in these islands. These are some of the example of the same place in the glacier of Alaska. And if you look at how area like this was 110 years ago, it looked like this, and today it is looking like this 20 years ago. So less than 150 years, how the biodiversity was lost in the same area. And therefore that is so that's what I'm saying, biogeographers are very much concerned with environment and ecosystem conservations and what may be done. So if you look at Alaska, you imagine Alaska is a mostly uninhabited land under United States. And if you see within 100 or 150 years, you see how the land cover of the area has changed drastically. Now this is a global land cover transformation from 900 AD to 1828, मतलब 1200 साल का ये इतिहास अगर आप देखें कि दुनिया में जो लैंड कवर है वो कैसे चेंज हो रहा है. तो जो प्राइमरी फॉरेस्ट है वो कम हो रहे हैं, सेकेंडरी फॉरेस्ट बढ़ रहे हैं, फॉरेस्ट की कमी हो रही है, आइस मोरलेस कम सेम दिखाई दे रहा है, बट यहाँ थोड़ा सा कमी आपको दिखेगा. क्रॉप्स का कल्टीवेशन बढ़ गया है, ग्रास बढ़ गए हैं, फॉरेस्ट कम होते जा रहे हैं. तो बेसिकली अगर आप पिछले 1800 साल या 2000 साल का इतिहास देखें तो हमारी जो फॉरेस्ट हैं उनमें कमी आ रही है, और फॉरेस्ट क्लियर होकर क्या बन रहे हैं, ग्रासलैंड बन रहे हैं या क्रॉप्स बनती जा रही हैं फॉर एग्रीकल्चर, राइट. And the non-forest land is increasing, ice sheets are gradually declining. So that is what we are seeing in terms of land covers across globe. This is the distribution within each continent, human disturbances of habitat by the continents. तो अगर आप देखें हर एक कॉन्टिनेंट में अगर मान लीजिए 100% जो भी लैंड है, आप देखें सबसे ज़्यादा यूरोप में देखें, क्लोज टू I think 60% or 70% land is now habited by the various human population groups. only 20% is partially habited, and remaining 20-15% is undisturbed ilaka, right? So Europe में देखें जितना भी land है, almost 80% land is completely or partially disturbed by human interventions for agriculture, for industry, for town urban planning and whatever. सबसे कम disturbance आपको कहाँ को देखने को मिल रहा है? If you can see this graph, maybe Australia, if you see, 60% of area is undisturbed. It's a very large land mass and very small population. If you look at Asia, after Europe, you have Asia. More than 50 or 60% of land is disturbed by human intervention. So gradually you see different part of the world. If you look at Africa, it's still at the third stage, right? So here 50% is undisturbed, 50% is disturbed, right? And we all know that gradually Asia, Africa are likely to follow the Western trend. So the point is that with increasing human interventions, increasing habitation of human population across the land mass, the biodiversity is under huge stress. These are some reserve, UNESCO accredited bioreserves across the world. So if you see, most of them are bioreserve are in Europe and the United States, right? Areas which are very much habited, and therefore these bioreserves were created to preserve and conserve the biodiversity which are endangered. This is a simple layout of what a bioreserve look like. So there are various zones within a bioreserve area. So the internal zone is undisturbed core area, जिसमें किसी को जाना allowed नहीं होता है. Then you have the buffer zone where you can go for monitoring, and then you have a tourism recreation center. So if you go to any bioreserve park in India and anywhere, they create these zones to make sure that जो भी सबसे ज़्यादा core area है वहाँ कोई जाके disturb ना करे, कोई उसमें खतरा ना हो. And then there are some monitoring zones जहाँ पे the security staff say and ensure the security of the core area, and then common public can go around in the periphery area of the bioreserve area just to get themselves acquainted, see these, interconnect with them, and do some small things so that the biodiversity may be preserved and protected. This is the degradation of ecosystems and how it can be treated. So if you look at the degradation of ecosystem, what you can do, if you do no action, then of course this is going to not revive automatically. You have to either do rehabilitations or you have to come with restoration of the original degradations of the ecosystem, because if the ecosystem is destroyed, all life form are destroyed, then of course the life is under a lot of stress. So you may have heard about biomes. Biomes are nothing but different species and communities of species living together in a given ecology. That is a biome, right? So for example, you have mountain, boreal biome system, you have oceanic biome system. There are various examples that I don't have a time to go in detail, but basically biomes are a bigger cluster of the life forms and the species, and they occupy a unique ecology or a unique ecological regions, right? So you have a very different biome in desert areas, you have a very different biome in high altitudinal tropical or temperate area, or similarly you have a very different biome in ocean area. So biome refers to different ecological conditions and how they support different community of species. So different community could be animals of different kind, birds, humanity, vegetation, forest. So a unique cluster of these species found in a unique set of ecological region conditions, which are referred to as biomes. So I think I want to stop it here. I think I have taken more time than I was allotted. So I apologize. If there are any reactions or there are any thoughts, any questions, feel free to ask, or if you want to write back, that also you can do. And I just share my, my email ID here. Yes. So please ask any question, or if you want to comment, feel free. Thank you.
थैंक यू वेरी मच सर. आपका ये सराहनीय लेक्चर हमें प्राप्त हुआ. सर विद्यार्थियों के कुछ प्रश्न हैं जो मैं पूछना चाहूंगी.
जी.
सर द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज फ्रॉम सत्यम पटेल. Sir, what are the various ways of in situ and ex situ conservation and how they differ from each other?
In situ and ex situ conservation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in situ matlab in place, ex situ means which is moving, right? So in situ means, so for example, if you think about these in situ conservation. So for example, this is a biosphere reserve, right? This is an identified area which is very important from ecological and biodiversity perspective. Now, what steps can we take to make sure that the biodiversity and particularly species which are under the stress of extinction may be properly looked after, right? So you can either make some bioreserves, or you can make certain laws. You can encourage awareness in that endangered area. In situ means a given area you have identified where there is a huge stress on the various life forms. So maybe you can make a bio kind of sphere reserve, and you can allocate that area, which you can now say that there is no direct community interaction with the restricted area. You can restrict this area. You can take actions, for example, uh, you can make poaching or hunting of these animals as illegal. You can take punitive actions. So this is what you can do in situ. Ex situ, of course, you can take for example, students, teachers, policymakers, and other persons can do a lot of dialogues. They can do a lot of advocacy at various levels, in the civil society and administration level, at the central government level, at the intergovernment level. You do a lot of awareness, fundraising activity you can do to create funds, because for able to create and make a lot of noise in the sense to create a voice for conservation of biodiversity, it requires a lot of collaborative effort. And this can only happen when people across different section of society, different areas in the country and different part of the world, they work together. So ex situ, there is no limit to what can be done, right? You can do campaigns, you can raise fund, you can do conferences, seminars, and talk about what is happening to different species, endangered species, or stress on any kind of crop. If there's some crop or fruit which is dying, how can we do preserve that or conserve that? So a lot of things can be done ex situ. In situ means identify the risk area, the risk zone, and how can you ameliorate the situation and improve or conserve the species under stress. So basically, this is the difference. In situ, where you have the problem, you directly go and intervene. Ex situ basically means to efforts that you may do in order to, so basically larger set of efforts which are long term. Here you have to think about immediately go on the ground and do something so that you can preserve the biodiversity of the area. Okay.
Okay, sir. So the next question is from
Yes.
Anusha Mira.
Mhm.
Sir, can it be said that human species are interfering in the natural selection process of other species?
Uh, Natural selection process of other, I mean, of course. See, if you look at human species, because we are the one of the most advanced species that has appeared on the planet, and we are responsible for not only influencing the natural selection, but also for the life and you know the extinction of many of these species. So for one of the simple example is, of course, the crops, various kinds of crops that we grow. और आप इस चीज को जरूर महसूस करते होंगे, right, कि gradually the variety of rice is getting limited. Why? Because given variety with genetical modification is now capturing the entire agriculture scene, right? So there are many such species which are a lot of stress because of human beings. And COVID times, there were many memes, and there are a lot of pictures that has circulated on internet, which shows that finally human beings have been caged, and now animals are walking free. So in some sense, I don't know it's the best scenario, but in some sense, it tells you that we have somewhere crossed the line in terms of interfering in the biodiversity. If you look at the graph that I was showing you, how much in different continents, the land or the area has been disturbed by human population, right? So in Europe it's 80%, in Asia it is 50%, Africa 40%, but Asia and Africa is likely to follow what has happened in Europe. So what is happening? We are completely destroying the biodiversity in various areas. So of course, we are likely to also influence the natural selection of the species. I do agree with this. Yes. Any other question? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please
Yes,
ask.
sir. The next question is from Dev Pandya.
Mhm.
Relocation of American cheetah to India is actually helping in conservation of species.
Yeah, yeah. So see, it depends. It depends if you are moving. So basically, it is like adopting a child, right? So if you are adopting a species from a foreign ecology, you're bringing him or her to a new ecology. You have to make sure before doing that that there are enough precautionary measure taken at the new place so that the foreign species can survive. Because the idea is great, but if the implementation is not so, then actually we are going to threaten the existence of the new host, the new guest, right? So I think it's a good idea, but it's just that you have to make sure. It's simply like if you want to grow, apples in the plains. It's a great idea. If you can do that, it's perfect. But if you are able, if you are convinced you can do it, please do it. There is no problem with that. Yes. Next.
Sir, the next question is from Vikesh Chaturvedi. The question is, can fossil occurrences be used to dispersal times?
Fossil. What was the word next?
Second,
Sir,
fossil
occurrence.
occurrence.
Yes. Yes. Tell me.
So occurrences, fossil occurrences.
Yes. Complete the question.
Can
Fossil
fossil
occurrences.
occurrences be used to dispersal time?
Dispersal time.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain this question? I'm not able to get it. Can you explain it a little bit? Sorry.
Please, Vikesh.
Can you explain the question?
अनुषा आप पूछ सकती हैं बेटा क्वेश्चन, या बच्चे डायरेक्ट भी क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं सर से, ठीक है? लिखने की अपेक्षा ठीक रहेगा कि आप डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन.
Yes, I think I got this question on the chat box, right? I think it is possible. I mean, if you have the fossil of a given species, right, and over different period of time or in different areas, that can help us to assess, the conditions or ecological time period when certain species was existing or not existing, and if there are regular episodes of fossils of the same species, you can say that this species was successful in modifying itself, because of its genetic composition or because of behavior or because of its reproduction rate, that it could survive in different geological eras, right? So there are various examples of species. For example, if you think about, I was just reading this book yesterday, there are many species that used to be very heavy in geological time periods, and gradually their weight has come down. One of the example is of mouse. So if you look at the mouse has a very long history of existence, right? So if you look at mouse in historical time periods, there are evidence which says that mouse used to be of like 200 or 500 kgs, right? And in the geological time scale, and over the time, with changing climatic conditions, with changing ecological conditions, and of course food and water and other things, and of course the competition as well, they have been successful in able to survive in different conditions, and that how the mouse spread in different parts of the world through expeditions, foreign expeditions from Europe in other part of the world. Gradually mouse came and became a guest for everyone, maybe unwanted guest, if I may say so. But now gradually the weight of this mouse has, typically these days you cannot find a mouse more than 15 or 10 kgs, if you can see, right? So this is just one example. These fossils are one of the biggest resources to understand the genesis, the dispersal, the modifications, and how these species have evolved over the years, right? So not only they can help you to understand the different time intervals when this species modified, also their occurrences in different regions also tells you that in what different climatic conditions they were able to survive, right? So it's a very good question actually. Thank you.
So
as
the
you
next question is
told,
from
Yes.
Vinny Joshi. What are the
Yes.
social and economical benefits of biodiversity?
Excellent question. See, There are many social and economic benefits, right? I think it's basically social benefit only. See, biodiversity, the greater biodiversity you have, it means what? It means that you have greater natural resources of medicine, right? Ultimately, if you have to think about good health, you need to have a good air, you need to have open space, you need to have different life forms. They can help each other. You think about food chain, food web, the interdependence between different life forms. So if you have the greater diversity, तो उसमें क्या होता है कि बहुत सारे वायरस या डिजीज जो भी आते हैं उनको खाने के लिए कोई दूसरा हायर ट्रॉपिक लेवल पे होता है, राइट? अगर आप उस ट्रॉपिक लेवल को या उस इकोलॉजिकल सिस्टम को डिस्टर्ब करते हैं, बायोडाइवर्सिटी को डिस्टर्ब करते हैं, सो वी पुट एक्स्ट्रा स्ट्रेस इन द इन्वायरमेंट, जिसको एड्रेस करने वाला कोई नहीं होता है. बहुत सारी चीजें होती है जिनको पता नहीं चलती, ऑटोमेटिकली उसका निदान हो जाता है. लेकिन जब भी इकोलॉजिकल सिस्टम को या बायोडाइवर्सिटी को हम डिस्टर्ब करते हैं, वी आर इंक्रीजिंग एक्सपोजर नॉट ओनली टू अस बट ऑल्सो फॉर द नेचर, राइट? तो आप देखते हैं वल्चर के बारे में हम लोग बहुत सुनते हैं, ग्रेजुअली वल्चर्स गायब हो गए. अब वल्चर गायब होने के बाद क्या प्रॉब्लम आई? There are many people who practice religion, and in different religion, you know, we have different methods of what you can say, cremations, correct? So among Parsis, you know, the way of cremation is that they leave the body in a space and let the birds to come and, you know, consume the body. But now with gradually, for various reasons, you find that these vultures and these are disappearing, right? So it has become very difficult for them to see that, you know, the body is actually cremated in the way that used to do, right? So there are various benefits. Economic benefits are tremendous, health benefits are tremendous. If I talk about the medicinal benefit of the traditional medicines, even today also, if you think about various medicine, the source is the vegetation, the forest, and other places. So suppose if we are endangering by reducing the biodiversity and clearing of the forest for various reasons, maybe agriculture, maybe habitation, maybe, you know, setting up a new maybe you want to construct a new dam. So for various reasons, so we are putting a lot of risk to us, and we are also compromising the environmental equilibrium, right? And we are geoparadising the scope for future generations to enjoy the nature that many of our forefathers have done, right? So बहुत सारी ऐसी चिड़ियां हैं, बहुत सारे ऐसे जीव जंतु हैं जो शायद 25 साल या 30 साल के बाद यहाँ नहीं दिखाई देंगे, right? So there are a lot of benefit in the sense that, I mean, not material benefit, but of course you have more emotional or psychological benefit that you can get of this biodiversity. Yes?
Sir, the next question is from Vikesh. Sir, I have heard about an animal named Archaeopteryx. It was present long back ago. It is a missing link and it had characteristics of both dinosaurs and birds. So, sir, my question is, it is only because of geographical adaptation or some other factor is also responsible?
Yes, I agree with you. You know, if you look at a specific species you are referring to or any other species, if they are able to survive for a long geological time scale, it means that they had a very different and specific, genetic composition. They have a very different adaptability skills, and therefore they could survive. Same species looks like different in different ecological settings, right? So I agree with you. I completely agree with you. Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear students. It is so nice to see that you have some interest in what I said, and I'm really pleased to see the interest. There is something one more.
Sir, जी sir. Sir, thank you very much for your valuable आपका जो व्याख्यान रहा है, बहुत ही सधे हुए शब्दों में बहुत ही अच्छे प्रेजेंटेशन के साथ आपने बच्चों को समझाया. और जैसा कि रेखा मैम ने कहा भी था कि हमारा जो पूरा लेक्चर सीरीज रहा है उसमें आपने बहुत ही अच्छी तरीके से कोऑपरेट किया है हमें, और आगे भी सर चाहेंगे कि नेक्स्ट सेम में भी स्टूडेंट्स जो है, आई थिंक ये मैं चूंकि सर पॉलिटिकल साइंस का हूँ, इसलिए ज्योग्राफी के बारे में मैं केवल वो जानता हूँ जो नेपोलियन बोनापार्ट ने कहा था कि हर कंट्री का जो फॉरेन पॉलिसी है वो उसकी ज्योग्राफी से बहुत ही ज्यादा संबंधित होता है. सर नेक्स्ट टाइम हम ध्यान रखेंगे कि ह्यूमन ज्योग्राफी का जो एक लेक्चर सीरीज हम रखें नेक्स्ट सेम में, आई थिंक अगस्त और सितंबर के आसपास. हमारे नए स्टूडेंट भी उसमें ऐड रहेंगे सर, उसमें हम आपका भी मार्गदर्शन चाहेंगे। और आज
बिल्कुल
आपने
सर।
सर अपना अमूल्य समय हमें दिया, उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद पूरी समाज विज्ञान अध्ययनशाला की ओर से, देवी अहिल्या विश्वविद्यालय की ओर से, और सारे विद्यार्थियों का भी धन्यवाद सर। विद्यार्थी हमारे बहुत ही धैर्य के साथ सुनते रहे, तो मुझे लगता है इनकी क्यूरियोसिटी का लेवल आपको मालूम पड़ चुका होगा इनके प्रश्नों के माध्यम से।
बिल्कुल,
सर
दे आर वेरी, बहुत अच्छे बच्चे हैं। आई मीन सो हैप्पी टू
जी
सी द
सर,
रिस्पांस, सो
जी सर,
हैप्पी।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका, और बाकी सारे विद्यार्थियों का भी। ओके सर, थैंक यू सर, धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू जी, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, एंड विश यू ऑल द बेस्ट फॉर योर फ्यूचर academic journey. All the best. Do well. Thank you, Ji.
थैंक यू,
Thank you, Satyam ji. Namaskar.
ओके सर।